It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway. A few friends, a camping trip in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. I was 28 at the time, a freelance photographer who was always chasing adventure and seeking solitude. Although I enjoyed the busy city life, there was something about escaping into nature that felt like a much-needed breath of fresh air. I was the one who suggested this spot far enough from crowded campsites, located near a quiet river that few people talked about. Something about the isolation was alluring, like a chance to truly disconnect from everything. We arrived just before sunset, the air already chilly as the dense forest loomed around us. The towering trees felt like silent guardians, watching over our campsite as we pitched our tents. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. The sun sank quickly, leaving behind a thick darkness. The campfire flickered, casting long shadows on the ground, but the forest beyond seemed to absorb the light, as though it was hiding something. As the night wore on, I began to feel uneasy. There was a heavy stillness in the air, a quiet that made my skin crawl. We tried to laugh it off to ignore the strange feeling, but then we heard something. At first, it was faint, like the wind whispering through the trees, but it soon became clear it was a melody, a soft yet haunting tune of a flute, drifting from deeper within the forest. It wasn't just the wind, it was music, and it was getting closer. I tried to dismiss it, thinking it must be someone else camping nearby, but the closer the music got, the stronger my fear grew. The melody floated among the trees, as if coming from somewhere deeper, until it suddenly stopped, leaving a chilling silence. That's when I realized there were no other campsites around. We were alone. The wind started to pick up, and I could swear I saw shadows moving beyond the circle of light from the campfire. Mike, one of my friends, decided to investigate. "I'll check it out," he said, his voice almost a whisper. We all begged him to stay, but his curiosity was stronger than the growing fear in the air. Flashlight in hand, he walked into the forest, following the sound of the flute. Minutes passed, then hours. The campfire started to die down, and Mike still hadn't returned. Our anxiety grew, and I could feel the darkness pressing in on us. I wanted to go after him, but something inside me held me back. The trees felt alive, watching us, waiting. Then, without warning, we heard the flute again. But this time, it was closer, almost as if it was right beside us. My heart raced as I realized the melody had changed. It was no longer soft, but a warning we couldn't ignore. We never saw Mike again. Authorities later told us there were no other campsites around and no trace of him was ever found. The flute stopped as soon as we left that place, but the sound, that haunting melody, still lingers in my mind. Every time I go camping now, I can't help but hear it, wondering if the forest will ever truly let us go. My name is Adam, a 27-year-old travel writer based in Chicago. After weeks of being consumed by deadlines and the chaos of city life, I decided it was time for a getaway. Yosemite National Park seemed like the perfect escape, a place to clear my mind and gather inspiration for my next article. I've camped alone before, but for some reason, this trip felt different. Deep down, I had this strange feeling that something was waiting for me there. I set up my tent in a secluded area, far from the crowds. Surrounded by towering pine trees and the gentle sound of a nearby stream, the surroundings felt peaceful. As the sun dipped below the Sierra Nevada mountains, the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. The night was calm, almost too calm. As darkness slowly enveloped the forest, I lit a small campfire, its warm glow dancing in the chilly evening air. While I was jotting down some notes in my journal, trying to soak in the tranquility, I heard it faint whistling. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling through the trees, but the sound was too deliberate, like a melody being played. I froze, listening carefully. It came again, clearer this time. I tried to brush it off, maybe another camper nearby, but I knew in my gut there was no one else around in this isolated part of the park. The whistling grew louder, almost as if it was drawing nearer. My heart started to race as I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the dark surroundings. Shadows of trees loomed like ominous figures, moving with the flicker of the fire. "Hello, anyone out there?" I called out, my voice shaky, no response. Then, without warning, the whistling stopped, complete silence. For a moment, I felt a sense of relief, but that was short-lived. The next sound I heard was footsteps crunching leaves and twigs underfoot. My heart thudded in my chest as I swung the flashlight around, searching the dark woods. "Whoever you are, stop messing around," I yelled, trying to sound braver than I felt. The footsteps ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew out my campfire, plunging me into complete darkness. In the pitch-black night, I saw something faint light in the distance, like a lantern swaying gently. My breath caught in my throat. Who would be carrying a lantern out here? I retreated into the tent, peeking through a small opening. The light slowly approached, stopping just a few meters from my tent. But there was no person holding the lantern. Just the light, hovering alone in the dark. I felt paralyzed, unable to think or move. I stayed inside my tent, too scared to move. The light eventually faded away, vanishing into the shadows. But I couldn't sleep, too uneasy to let my guard down. As the first light of dawn began to break, I finally summoned the courage to step outside. There was no trace of anyone or anything. Everything seemed normal, but the unease still lingered. I packed up my gear and left without a second glance. I tried to tell myself that it was all just a trick of the mind, a product of being alone in the woods. But the sound of that whistling, the mysterious lantern light, haunted me. There was something in those woods that I couldn't explain. That night in Yosemite had changed the way I would forever see the wilderness. It was supposed to be an exciting, new experience for the weekend. As someone who usually enjoys nature through the lens of a screen rather than stepping into it, the idea of camping seemed like a big challenge. Emma, my energetic and always optimistic close friend, and Liam, the quiet, thoughtful one, managed to convince me to join them on a camping trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. "It's going to be fun, trust me," Emma said, flashing me one of her signature smiles. I agreed, albeit reluctantly, still unsure about the idea of sleeping under the stars. The first day felt absolutely magical. The towering oak and maple trees surrounded our little campsite, their shadows swaying gently in the faint light of the campfire. The night air was fresh, and the soft murmur of a nearby stream created a soothing, natural melody. The sky was so clear, packed with stars, that it felt as if we could reach out and touch them. Emma busied herself with roasting marshmallows while Liam neatly rolled up his sleeping bag. Everything felt perfect, like we were transported into another world far from the noise of the city. But as the night deepened, the peaceful atmosphere began to shift. I was suddenly awoken by the sound of a branch snapping outside the tent. At first, I thought it was just the wind or perhaps a small animal passing by. But the sound kept coming, growing closer, and it began to resemble the slow, deliberate footsteps of someone trying to sneak around. My heart started to race. From Liam's tent, I heard his whisper, tight with anxiety, "Do you hear that?" I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. But then another noise emerged, a faint humming sound that was eerily distinct. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was more like a human chant, with a rhythm and pitch that sent chills down my spine. Emma, usually the calm one, unzipped her tent. With a flashlight in hand, she stepped outside and called into the night, "Hello?" "Who's there?" Her voice was firm, though I could tell she was equally afraid. Suddenly, the humming stopped, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. Then, just outside the beam of Emma's flashlight, I saw it, a shadowy figure standing still between the trees. It was there for only a few seconds, then vanished into the darkness. My breath caught in my throat, and Liam looked paler than I had ever seen him. Emma backed away slowly, her eyes locked on the trees. "Did you see that?" she asked in a shaky voice. We huddled together around the campfire, clutching whatever sticks we could find to use as makeshift weapons. None of us dared to go back into the tents. The night felt endless, and every tiny sound from the woods made us jump. The fire, which had been bright and warm earlier, was now dimming, adding to the growing sense of dread. We stayed on alert until, at last, the first light of dawn began to seep through the trees. When the sun finally rose, the forest was calm again, like nothing had happened. There was no trace of the figure we had seen. Liam and I tried to recall the details, but it all felt blurry. Emma, who was usually so confident, was unusually quiet as she packed up her gear. We made the decision to leave the campsite without saying much more, eager to get away from the eerie place. Looking back on that night, I still can't explain what happened. Was it just our imagination? Or was there something in the woods that we weren't supposed to disturb? I'll never know. What I do know is that this camping trip was both my first and last. From now on, I'd prefer to admire the beauty of nature from a distance, through the screen of my laptop,